murdered his best friend in cold blood, and then carried on like nothing ever happened. No panic, no remorse, just a chilling calm. For days, Brandon Risner walked around as if he hadn't just taken a life, smiling, texting, acting like the same old friend everyone thought they knew. But that calm wouldn't last, because when the police knocked on his door, they weren't just there for a chat, they were there with questions, suspicion, and enough evidence to crack through his carefully built lie.
We're all on the same page.
We started drinking around 12 yesterday.
Yeah, it's you and Aaron, right?
Yeah, me and Aaron.
Okay. Anyone else with you guys?
And we went to some bars, and I had bought some red wine.
Yeah.
And came back here, started drinking red wine. He doesn't drink too often, so
Yeah.
he had gone upstairs and was just puking everywhere to the toilet. It was like standing up and puking for some reason. I went downstairs and he told me that he doesn't need any help. I went downstairs, dropped a bottle, cut my pinky, and I went to the urgent care this morning, took a shower, went to bed,
Okay.
and then woke up 1 to 2 a.m. in his car.
You think you know someone. Maybe they're your best friend, someone you've known for years. You trust them like family. But sometimes, the most shocking crimes come from the people we least expect. This is the story of Brandon Risner, a man who seemed like any other guy. Until one brutal night, he killed a close friend. This is the chilling story of Aaron Davis and how betrayal turned into a nightmare. Aaron Davis was just 21 years old when his life was cut short by someone he trusted. He had everything to live for: a bright future, a loving family, and friends who cared about him. But on the 11th of November, 2022, everything changed. Aaron was killed by someone who had been a part of his life for years. Brandon Risner. Someone who had been welcomed into Aaron's family. Someone who sat at their dinner table. Someone who appeared to be a friend. But as it turns out, Risner had something much darker brewing beneath the surface. Welcome to Mystery Unveiled. Thank you, my viewers. A special thank you to our loyal subscribers for joining us as we uncover the darkest, most gripping true crime stories every single day. Your support fuels our mission to bring you both infamous cases and chilling untold mysteries. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Brandon Risner was a 23-year-old man from Rome, Georgia. He was someone who seemed harmless enough, quiet, reserved, and often part of the Davis family's gatherings. But beneath his calm exterior, there were signs that something was wrong. Mental health struggles, a dark side that no one saw coming, and a plan so twisted, it would change everything. What happened next was a murder so horrific, it shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Brandon Risner didn't just kill Aaron Davis, brutally stabbed him multiple times, dismembered parts of his body, and left him to rot in a shallow grave. But that's not even the most disturbing part. The most chilling thing was how meticulously Risner planned the entire thing. It was cold, calculated, and premeditated. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was murder with a twisted purpose. Sarah Davis, Aaron's mother, spoke in court with a grief so raw, it was impossible to ignore. She didn't just lose her son that day, she lost a piece of her soul. And as she recounted how Risner, who had been welcomed into her home for years, had planned the murder while eating dinner at her table, the reality of the betrayal hit home. Risner had been like family to them. But in the end, he became their worst nightmare. But Risner's family didn't see it coming. His parents, devastated by what their son had done, begged the judge for leniency, citing his mental health struggles. They claimed Brandon had always been a kind, gentle person, someone who never showed signs of violence. But as the trial went on, it became clear. The man they thought they knew wasn't who he appeared to be, and the family that had taken him in now left to pick up the pieces of a broken trust. Aaron Davis was the kind of guy you'd expect to see at a family BBQ, joking around with his friends and making everyone laugh. He was 21, but he had a heart that seemed much bigger than his age. Born and raised in Georgia, Aaron had a life full of promise. He was the youngest of 3 siblings, always the one to make his family proud, and always ready for a good time, a true people person. Aaron had a lot going for him. He was social, outgoing, and had a smile that could light up a room. He wasn't the kind of guy who would ever suspect something like this happening to him. But behind that smile, there was a darkness lurking that Aaron didn't even know about. Aaron had a close-knit group of friends, but there was one person who stuck out among them, Brandon Risner. At first glance, Risner seemed like just another one of those quiet guys who didn't really stand out in a crowd, but he quickly became part of Aaron's life, like a fixture in his world. And that's where everything started to shift. Brandon Risner, 23 years old, was from Rome, Georgia. A quiet town, where people knew each other's names and families stuck together. Risner's parents describe him as kind and gentle, a young man who never showed a violent side. But that's not the whole story, because somewhere along the way, Brandon started to change. Growing up, Risner was an average kid. He had friends, a family who loved him, and, from the outside, nothing out of the ordinary. But deep down, Risner struggled with mental health issues. He was battling thoughts of suicide and depression, and he reached out for help. His parents, well-meaning but perhaps unaware of the depth of his struggles, tried to support him the best they could. But the more Brandon opened up about his feelings, the more it seemed like something wasn't clicking. He sought professional help, but no amount of therapy seemed to really change how he felt. Instead, it all built up, bottled up, until one day, it all came to a head in the most violent way imaginable. Aaron and Brandon's friendship was solid. They spent a lot of time together eating meals, going to the fair, and sharing life's little moments. But Risner was hiding something deep inside. Something darker. A feeling of resentment maybe, or perhaps even jealousy. Whatever it was, it festered. One of the most chilling things? Risner wrote song lyrics before and after the murder. These weren't just words, they were a glimpse into his state of mind. A window into the twisted thoughts swirling around in his head. He wasn't just thinking about Aaron as a friend. No, it seems like Aaron had become more of a target, someone Risner couldn't escape from. But even as Risner sat at the dinner table with Aaron's family, enjoying their company, he was plotting something dark, something unfathomable. It's almost as if, all along, he had been playing a part of facade that kept Aaron, and everyone else, in the dark about what was the 11th of November, 2022, the day Aaron Davis's life ended. On the outside, it seemed like just another night. Aaron had been staying at Brandon's house, like he had done countless times before. But this night, something was different. Something was off. Brandon Risner had been planning Aaron's death for days, maybe even longer. What followed was horrific. Aaron was stabbed multiple times, she's head, chest, torso, and extremities all targeted. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a calculated, cold-blooded murder. But it didn't stop there. Brandon didn't just kill Aaron. He went further. Risner removed parts of Aaron's body, including portions of his small intestines, as if the violence itself wasn't enough. He then placed Aaron's body in Davis's vehicle, drove it to a secluded area, and buried him in a shallow, unmarked grave. What kind of person does that? What kind of monster hides a body like that? After the murder, Brandon Risner thought he had covered his tracks. He moved quickly, hiding the evidence and burying the body, thinking that no one would ever suspect him. But the thing about covering up a murder is, it's never as easy as it seems. People start to ask questions. Questions that lead to the unraveling of the lies. And that's exactly what happened. Aaron's family quickly became concerned. Days went by without any word from him. It wasn't like Aaron to just disappear. No calls, no texts, no sign of life. His parents, Sarah and her husband, knew something was wrong. They called his friends, they checked his social media accounts, nothing. Then Aaron's car was found abandoned, miles away from where he was last seen. But there was no sign of him, no trace. Authorities were soon alerted. They launched a full investigation, trying to piece together the mystery of Aaron's disappearance. But little did they know, the answers were closer than they thought. Sarah Davis, Aaron's mother, knew something wasn't right. There had to be a reason why her son, a young man who had everything ahead of him, had just vanished without a trace. Aaron had always been close to his family, so why had he disappeared? And more importantly, where was he? The police soon launched a search when they found Aaron's car abandoned. It wasn't far from Risner's house, and its discovery set the wheels of investigation in motion. The vehicle was empty. Nothing seemed out of place, but something didn't sit right. It was clear that Aaron hadn't left willingly. And so began the search for the truth, one that would reveal a nightmare no one could have predicted. The investigation took a grim turn when, just a few hours later, they found the unmarked grave. Hidden beneath an uprooted tree, the shallow grave was the final resting place of Aaron Davis. A body, cold and lifeless, and buried with the intent to hide the truth forever. But in the end, the truth was coming to the surface faster than anyone expected. What investigators didn't know at first was that this wasn't just any murder. This was the act of someone who knew Aaron well, someone he had called a friend, Brandon Risner. The very person who had been welcomed into the Davis family's home time and time again. The same person who had been part of their everyday lives. And now, that very person was a murderer. As soon as Aaron's body was discovered, the investigation focused squarely on Risner. The police dug into his background, hoping to find some clue that could explain why a seemingly kind, quiet young man would commit such a brutal crime, and what they found was chilling. One of the first things that stood out were Risner's journals and song lyrics. Written before and after the murder, they painted a dark and twisted picture of the young man's state of mind. Risner had been expressing violent thoughts, long before Aaron's death thoughts that had festered into something far more sinister. The lyrics described disturbing fantasies, ones that mirrored the very crime he had committed. At first, Risner tried to deny everything. He claimed he didn't know where Aaron was, that he had nothing to do with his disappearance. But as the evidence piled up, it became clear that his story was falling apart. The blood in his home, the blood on his clothes, the DNA matching Aaron's everything pointed to one horrifying conclusion: Risner had killed his friend. What was more unsettling was the sheer planning behind the murder. Risner didn't act on impulse. No, this was something he had thought about, something he had methodically planned. He had lured Aaron to his home under false pretenses, a place where they had spent many moments together, a place where Risner had carefully plotted his friend's demise. The trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution and defense presented their cases. The prosecution was adamant. This wasn't a crime of passion or a fleeting act of violence. No, this was cold, calculated murder. A young man, once trusted by a grieving family, had taken everything away from them. The defense, however, painted a different picture, a picture of a troubled young man who had suffered from mental health issues, who had been dealing with dark thoughts for years. Aaron's mother, Sarah, took the stand and shared her heartbreak with the court. She spoke of her son, a kind-hearted young man who never deserved what happened to him. She described the pain of losing her child, the betrayal she felt knowing that the person who had killed Aaron had been welcomed into their home, treated like family. But Risner's parents, who had always seen their son as a kind and gentle person, begged the court for leniency. They spoke of his mental health struggles, his battles with depression, and the warning signs they had missed. They wanted the judge to understand that this was not the son they knew. But the prosecution wasn't moved. This wasn't just a tragic mental health incident, it was a deliberate, premeditated murder. The judge, after hearing the arguments and reviewing the evidence, handed down his sentence: life in prison for Brandon Risner. No chance of parole. For Aaron's family, the sentence was a small measure of justice, but it would never bring their son back, and it could never fill the void left in their hearts. Sarah Davis left the courtroom that day with a bittersweet sense of closure. She would never stop grieving for her son, but at least for now, she had the comfort of knowing that the man who had taken Aaron's life would never walk free again. The story of Brandon Risner and Aaron Davis is a tragic reminder of how the darkness within someone can often remain hidden. Risner wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He wasn't some stranger lurking in the shadows. He was someone who had been part of the family, who had sat at their table, shared in their joys and sorrows. And yet, behind his kind smile, there was a twisted side of Himone that, in the end, claimed the life of a young man with so much potential. As the community grieves the loss of Aaron, it's a reminder to never take our safety, our trust, and our relationships for granted. The darkness can show up in the most familiar faces, and sometimes, the people we trust the most can betray us in the worst ways.